Good morning, friends. Today we are going to learn next part of T.S. Eliot Tradition and Individual Talent, which was published in 1919. In the previous part, we learned about how T.S. Eliot talks about tradition and individual talent, and introductory part about the Homer, Dante work of Shakespeare, and how he has given importance to the tradition for the artist and his artistic work. See, the next part, that is importance to the past. In tradition and individual talent, T.S. Eliot given importance to the past. In short, knowledge of writers of the past makes contemporary writers both part of that tradition and part of the contemporary scene. Eliot's own poetry, for instance, is simultaneously in the tradition of Homer and Dante and the work of a modern poet, and it is because of his debt to Homer and Dante that he is both modern and traditional. See, here we can understand how he tries to define the tradition with the help of the past poets. If this sound like a paradox, consider how Shakespeare is often considered both a timeless poet not of an age, but for all time, as his friend Ben Jonson said, whose work is constantly being reinvented but is also understood in the context of Elizabethan and Jacobean social and political attitudes. So, here a writer wants to suggest that how Shakespeare is often considered both a timeless poet, but it is also understood in the context of Elizabethan and Jacobean social and political attitudes. Similarly, in using Dante in his own poetry, Eliot at once makes Dante modern and contemporary, and it himself, by association, part of the video poetic tradition. According to Eliot, the poet's personality does not matter as it's the poetry that he or she produces that is important. Famously, he observes poetry is not a turning loose of emotions, but an escape from emotion. It is not the expression of personality, but an escape from personality. Here, he gives importance and given definition of the impersonalization or depersonalization. But of course, only those who have personality and emotions know what it means to want to escape from these things. Example of Homer given by the writer. Eliot's example of Homer is pertinent here, that we know nothing of the poet who wrote the Odyssey or Satyr, but we don't need to. The Odyssey itself is what matters, not the man or man or woman who wrote it. Poetry should be timeless and universal, transcending the circumstances out of which it grew and transcending the poet's own generation and lifetime. See how the poetry should be a timeless. T.S. Eliot makes the overall case that the individual talent of a given poet or artist of any kind must always be measured in relationship to a tradition of poets and artists. So here writer T.S. Eliot talks about the relationship to a tradition of poets and artists. No poet No artist of any art has his complete meaning alone, writes Eliot. His significance, his appreciation is the appreciation of his relation to the dead poets and artists. You cannot value him alone. You must set him for contrast and comparison among the dead. According to T.S. Eliot, tradition is a literary history, which means the relationship of the poem to the work of dead poets and artists. Here we can understand, as in the previous lecture we learned about tradition and individual talent divided into three parts, and that is the first part. It talks about the tradition. In fact, Eliot maintains that a contemporary poet or artist should actually strive to earn his or her way into this preceding tradition. New works must first take into account this tradition and build on it, and they will be judged critically in relation to this tradition. See, here we can understand how he has given importance to the tradition, and at the same time he presents the anti-romanticism and opposite to the emotions and feelings of the writer or the artist. Artist should be related to the his tradition and write about those traditions without feelings. Its subject should be objective one. Individual literary and artistic production then relies heavily on tradition. The poet or artist must have a keen awareness of and respect for the past. Here, T.S. Eliot shows that the respect for the past is an important one. Even more, the poet has to work hard to engage with this tradition. Poet is not a passive recipient of tradition but actively engages with tradition to develop new work. In the second part of the essay, Eliot develops further his theory of the impersonality of poetry. He compares the mind of the poet to a catalyst and the process of poetic creation to the process of a chemical reaction. Just as chemical reactions take place in the presence of a catalyst alone, so also the poet's mind is the catalytic agent for combining different emotions into something new. Different emotions, here it means emotions that is related to the tradition. Suppose there is a jar containing oxygen and sulfur dioxide. These two gases combine to form sulfurous acid when a fine filament of platinum is introduced into the jar. The combination takes place only in the presence of the piece of platinum, but the metal itself does not undergo any change. It remains inert, neutral, and unaffected. So, in the same manner, writer here given example of the sulfur dioxide and how the sulfur dioxide and oxygen plus platinum become a sulfurous acid. Here sulfur dioxide is a feeling, oxygen is emotions, platinum is mind of the poet. So mind of the poet should not be changed in the writing of the poem. No trace of poet's personality should be there. So the poet should be objective. Poet should not think about much for the uh, emotions and feelings, and he must remain as a catalytic agent, one of the part of the writing. The mind of the poet is like the catalytic agent. It is necessary for new combinations of emotions and experiences to take place, but it itself does not undergo any change during the process of poetic combination. The mind of the poet is constantly forming emotions and experiences into new wholes, but the new combination does not contain even a trace of the poet's mind, just as the newly formed sulfurous acid does not contain any trace of platinum. See how there should not be a trace of the platinum. It means there should not be a trace of poet's mind on his poetry. So, in this way, here is the second part of the writer's individual and tradition and individual talent. In the next lecture, we will learn about the next part of it, of tradition and individual talent, and what is the conclusion of the T.S. Eliot. Till then, stay home, stay safe. Thank you.